Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the live stream. If you are tuned into the live stream, and welcome to the last episode of Inside the Criminal Mind. I'm in such shock that I actually did it. I mean, this is my first time actually completing, setting a goal for myself to do a specific number of episodes and actually completing these episodes. So I think that this is a major win and great practice for me in the book of my content creation. I am possibly going to return back to this series, obviously, because that's usually how YouTube series go. So we'll consider this the first season, finally. This is the season finale, I guess you can say, for Inside the Criminal Mind. Like I said, eventually I'll come back and do another season of Inside the Criminal Mind with another 12 episodes because obviously there are so many episodes to the show. I mean, the 16th season just recently came out, like this year, I think. So I think that it's, a really good show to basically continue. And especially whenever you're thinking about or whenever you're doing like reviewing of certain criminal behavior and how it relates. Now, I decided I'm going to go ahead and announce like the next series before I dive into the final episode of Inside the Criminal Mind. I think that I just realized I didn't update the text in this. My bad. Just ignore the text on this slide because apparently I did not update it. I updated the notes portion. I didn't update this portion. But don't worry. I'll tell you guys which episode I'm doing today. Anyways, back to where I was at, saying which series, what I'm going to do next. So what kind of live streams am I going to do next? I'm a little undecided if I'm going to do live streams. I might just do a series, new videos every week. I'm going to do Psych Student Reacts. So I'm going to be reacting to certain TikToks, certain maybe YouTube videos, and it's going to be basically like me in the psychological student aspect of things, in where I will comment like as we watch certain things and how like what it says psychologically. Obviously, this will be somewhat rooted in theory. Like I'm going to base certain things off of different theories that I've learned about and that I know and that I'm currently learning about. I am actually currently nearing the end of my master's degree, so, but I fully plan on continuing my education and getting my doctorate. So, the Psych Student React will still be true because I will still be considered a student, just more of a doctoral student, instead of just a regular old college student. So, that's basically along the lines of what I'll be working on next. Now, as far as a release date, probably sometime in May, but more details will be coming soon, of course. So, with that being said, let's introduce the final episode of Inside the Criminal Mind. Now, as you can see here, I accidentally did not update the text in the slide. This currently says episode 11, which was last week's episode, but we're actually at episode 12. Let me just pull up my notes. Okay. The official beginning here. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 12th episode of Inside the Criminal Mind, where I review a selection of Criminal Minds episodes, break down the criminology and victimology and how these behaviors could have potentially been prevented. This episode covers Season 7, Episode 7, titled There's No Place Like Home. Now, if you're a big Criminal Minds fan, you might remember this episode as the one that was mentioning Oklahoma, the one that had a lot of tornadoes in it. So if you're from Oklahoma or the Central States, Tornado Alley, then you might be pretty familiar with this episode. Or even if you're not from Tornado Alley, you're probably familiar with this episode. It really just depends on what your experience is with tornadoes or the show Criminal Minds. So, anyways, moving on. As always, I will start with an introduction as someone who may be dropping in and seeing this episode for the first time. Then I will do a synopsis of the episode to establish that everyone is familiar with what I'm reviewing. Then I will cover the criminology and victimology relevant to the characters in this episode. And then I will go over how this behavior could have been prevented, and then, of course, a conclusion, which is usually the same every time if you think about it, basically because it's the same concept. A lot of times childhood trauma happens, and I'm jumping ahead. Okay, so an introduction. If you've been here before, great, then you know me. But if you haven't, this is your first time, then hi, my name is Sharissa. I'm also Eradication Writer on Instagram, Eradication Wellness also on Instagram, Eradication Lady on Twitter, etc., etc. You might know me from Facebook, where I'm known as Sharissa Marie. However, my Facebook is kept private, and I only add people that I know. Anyways, my mental health journey, along with everybody else's mental health journey, was very unique and very complex. But whose isn't? But my mental health journey really inspired me to take action. I really want to help explain the concepts of psychology and to really dive deep into the different concepts of psychology and how they can be applied and better the environment or society overall. We see a lot of different changes happening in the world currently. And even before we saw it, but now it's pretty important. And so my mental health journey was actually very indicative of that. It was very practical of that. There were a lot of lessons that I learned within myself, and then I ended up realizing that a lot of other people were also learning those same types of lessons. So I realized that it's just an important concept altogether to emphasize and explain. So why Criminal Minds? Well, because criminal behavior can be related to societal issues. Like I said, usually criminal behavior boils down to childhood trauma that might have happened. And some people never really escape the childhood trauma. Some people never are able to unravel the trauma from their childhood. They're not able to process it and make sense of it. So it later manifests itself as criminal behavior because that's all that they know as true and, what's healthy, even if it's unhealthy. This series also provides a lot of different examples of behavior and from multiple perspectives. We've seen it several times where, you might think that someone is a horrible person. I mean, yeah, they did horrible things. They did horrible, heinous, horrific things. But the reason behind it, they honestly just didn't have the chance to see the failure in their ways and so on and so forth. So I think that this series is really beneficial to put these perspectives basically in view for everyone to be able to perceive it in a different way, because that's what the beauty is about the human mind, that not everybody thinks the same and behaves the same and processes in the same way. So, trigger warning, there's mention of tornadoes, suicide, and sexual assault. This episode opens in a severe thunderstorm. If you're from the Midwest or more currently the South, then you know how frightening that it can be. There is a man in a Winnebago who drags a nearly unconscious boy into the storm, beats him to death, then lets the tornado take the body to be found later. The guy even mentions the wrath of God himself while ceremoniously beating the kid. All the victims appear to be runaways linked with prostitution. it becomes apparent that the unsub is collecting body parts to create a new body. Turns out his brother was killed in a tornado nearly a decade earlier. So the team was able to save the final victim. However, the unsub carries what body parts he did collect into the tornado, unaliving himself, essentially. So it was a pretty intense episode as far as the graphics go for the tornadoes. I am... I wouldn't call myself a symphorophiliac, as they mention in later, or so at some point in the episode, they mention that the unsub is a symphorophiliac, which is someone who is aroused by disaster. I wouldn't go as far to say that I can understand, but I know I do enjoy the beauty of tornadoes. The amount of sheer power that they have is like overwhelmingly beautiful to me. But that's as far as I would go to say that. So this episode definitely has a lot of cool like graphics that show like the tornadoes, and it's kind of interesting. Yeah, but definitely a recommend watch if you like Oklahoma or the Tornado Alley or tornadoes, or if you like references to Jeffrey Dahmer. Anyways, let's look at the criminology and victimology. Travis targeted Caucasian teen boys who usually were runaways with records for drugs and prostitution, and who seemed protective of someone. So he would, whenever he was looking for his next victim, he would look for victims who seemingly had that protective type of vibe to them. For instance, in one of the scenes, he approaches like this group of like homeless looking kids. And I say that because they're very dirty. You can tell that they probably don't have like a stable place to live. They probably don't have like the like safety of a home, like a stable home environment. So, however, the victim that he ended up finding in that scene was very protective of the other boys that were around him. So obviously, he ended up targeting that kid, who didn't end up making it, by the way. And then even with the last boy, you could tell. Now, the last boy wasn't actually a runaway, or nor was he involved in prostitution. But since this guy was getting desperate, and this was the last final victim, he was willing to settle. Basically, he knew that this pattern of severe weather was ending soon, so he's like, oh well, this boy will do, because he's very protective of his younger brother, and that's what he wanted, or that's what his big brother was like whenever he was alive. He was very protective. So he would use cough syrup and beer as a tranquilizer, then tie them up until a tornado was getting ready to touch down. He would dismember their bodies right after killing them, leaving the remainder of the body behind for the tornado. So essentially it was to... he was letting the tornado ceremoniously cover up the evidence of murder. So, like, even if there was sexual abuse that happened, the tornado would get rid of the evidence of that. Obviously, I mean, there's like a lot of rain and mud and other debris, so there's not really any way to, apparently, according to the medical examiners in the show, that there's not enough I guess, of ability to test that. Anyways, Travis James was also discussed to also be a symphorophiliac. As I said, it's somebody who is aroused by disaster. So, in this case, you know, he, like I said, he mentioned that the power of a tornado is like the wrath of God himself. So it was obviously very ceremonious to him to um, basically, do this whole ceremony to try to replicate his brother who had died like a decade before. And it's very interesting. So yes, he is definitely based on Jeffrey Dahmer. The only reason why he is based on Jeffrey Dahmer is because that he's going through this whole thing of dismembering his victims for the sole purpose of to create another person, even though that's not how that works. If we know anything about Jeffrey Dahmer, we knew that he basically was trying to create his own zombies in a way. Kind of like a control type of thing. And in this case, he was trying to recreate his brother. It was odd and not very well explained why he waited 10 years or so later. But the best explanation that I could say was that the weather patterns just lined up perfectly, and he saw this as a chance to see his brother again, essentially. So let's look at the victimology. The teen boys being runaways with criminal records makes them apt to submission to get something that they want or need. So as, for instance, these boys, they were looking for either drugs or money or something of the sort. Travis he would have weed or alcohol to offer, and that would be pretty much it. But that's how he would also end up luring these teenage boys into his Winnebago. The last victim, the survivor, was an unlikely target. The unsub was desperate and fully took him. So because the unsub was desperate and he knew that he needed the time, not the time, he needed someone to, as like a placeholder, he needed someone to finish that recreation of his brother. So like I said, that last victim, he wasn't a runaway or anything, but he was very reminiscent, like protective of like Travis's older brother, and that's why he decided to target him. So let's look at the criminal and victim prevention. Travis was sexually abused by a neighbor. His older brother found out and went to beat the neighbor up. However, after that, the tornado siren started going off. His brother and mother died in the tornado, and he ended up going into foster care. So obviously, there could be some childhood trauma and especially loss. Like, he went from being sexually abused by his neighbor to possibly seeing that his neighbor had died at the hands of his brother, to a tornado ripping through and demolishing the whole trailer park that they lived in and killing his brother and mother both at the same time. And going into foster care, I mean, there probably wasn't proper intervention. And I think that it's clear on what sparked these weird connections between murder and tornadoes, because I think this brings a good point that foster care does not have adequate enough resources to help children coming into the system, especially children who are coming out of extremely traumatic situations. Like, that is a lot of stress, and a lot of different types of stress being just all pushed together. So I don't think that it makes for a very healthy environment to just rip them from one environment and put them into another environment. As for victims, and I know this sounds cliche, don't talk to strangers. If you get a weird vibe, I'm a whole believer of trusting your gut instinct. And if your gut feels really bad about somebody, don't talk to them, don't go near them, don't give them your time. Better safe than sorry. Even if you look like a crazy person because you don't want to talk to a stranger, it's fine because you probably saved your life. And then also seek help. if you feel, even if you are homeless, even, you know, I think that's another part of the issues is that people don't seek proper help because they don't think that they'll be believed or taken seriously. And I think that that also explains another like societal issue that we have, because there's a lot of people who don't seek help because they don't think they'll be listened to, especially if you're a woman or other minority marginalized group. And then here we go. We're at the conclusion. Obviously, we want to recap that childhood trauma can affect your personality development. Childhood trauma can affect the types of decisions that you make. They affect, your emotional processing years later, even. There's things that I didn't understand until I processed those emotions that I felt back when I was 5, 6, 7 years old. And guess what? They didn't start really affecting me until I was 21, 22, 23 years old. But once I was able to process those emotions and understand why I felt the way that I did, things started to click, and I finally started to understand what needed to be done to realign my mindset. Of course, support is important. Support is always important. And under support is also included with intervention. So proper intervention is a major key to making sure that you're that you're receiving the help that you need. If you go through something traumatic, chances are that the support is going to help you. So having a support group is important in these situations to collectively seek closure, but not even just to seek closure, to learn. You also get to learn coping mechanisms. You also get to learn how to communicate properly and without hurting anybody. So keep that in mind. As always, if anybody has any questions or comments or suggestions or concerns or anything, all of the above, just please do not hesitate to drop a comment and let me know what you think, because I like feedback. But yeah, other than that, I will see you all during the next series that I decide to do. And yeah. With that, I will go. I hope everyone has an amazing week, and I will see you all soon in the new series.